What's up? How you doing? It's Jared. It's a 535 Bugout from Benchmade. They keep doing this. The last one was a 319 proper, and they kind of dropped this. They didn't announce it. They didn't let anyone know that it was coming out. They just dropped it. Here you guys go. They did the same thing with this one. No rhyme or reason for it. And honestly, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm kind of excited for it. I like just being surprised, and I was really surprised with this one because I know this thing is going to hit the market like a bomb. A lot of people are going to be buying this knife. It's going to be really successful for them. It's so thin, it's so lightweight, so easy to carry. There's a lot of new innovation into this knife, and honestly, none of that is the reason I liked it. The biggest thing that set me off is this blue coloring, the blue thumb stud, the bright blue handle. I really like it. It really excites me for the Dash 1 series because you know they're going to come out with the Dash 1 series in like a G10. They're probably going to do a G10 model just like they did with the 530. I really think that they're probably going to follow that same pattern with this one here. Maybe they'll come out with a special edition in 1801 for the SHOT Show knife. Who knows, next year or something like that. And I'm really curious on what the color scheme is going to be. What colors are they going to go with? What are they going to do differently? I really am just curious to see where this family of knife goes because there's a lot you can do with this platform. There's a lot of just change and customizing and capability behind the way that this thing is done. There's a lot of color to it. There's a whole lot of color that can be changed, and so I think that's going to be excellent. I definitely like this DLC coated titanium lock bar, axis lock bar. I think it's really pretty. I love the way the DLC just kind of shines, that really shiny black. And you notice the little plate coming off of the back of that actual knife on the other side of the Omega spring is huge. And so it leads to this lock being pretty stable. Out of most axis locks have a little bit of side-to-side motion. This is a Benchmade Griptilian 553 SBK Griptilian. It's disassembled for a completely different reason. But you can see this lock bar rocks side to side, and it's still got that little bit of shelf. There's a little bit of shelf on the opposite side of that Omega spring right there, and that helps just aid in preventing that side-to-side movement of the actual lock bar. And these plates come out extra far, right? And so it actually adds to the aesthetic of the knife because there's more black covering inside that, more black inside that actual little hole, inside the lock bar to the lock bar itself, I guess, that it just looks really good with all the black hardware and the blue frame with the blue thumb stud. I think this is a freaking beautiful knife, and that's one of the reasons I think it's going to do really well. I really suspect that this knife is going to be a really big hit for him. I don't know as far as the actual capability, the actual uses behind this knife. It's designed as a backpacking knife. It's what they came up with it for. And for that, I think it's going to be excellent. For a really light use backpacking knife, it's going to be great. But for hard use tasks, anything like that, I don't think this is the best knife. This isn't a great defensive option. I mean, it definitely will work in that circumstance, but there's other really lightweight options that kind of cover the field a little bit better than this thing does. So don't cut my fingers. This is a Manix 2 lightweight from Spyderco right here. And this doesn't sacrifice that defensive capability. It doesn't sacrifice too much of that, tactical purpose, whatever you want to say. But you're still losing a little bit of, harder use tasks. And it's the same thing with this knife here. Except this doesn't have as good of a defensive capability behind the design. This really is geared more towards that ultra lightweight, ultra light use knife. And the blade stock thickness kind of remedies that. Because this is less than a 0.1 inch thick blade stock thickness on this S30V blade right here. And so, I mean, that's a positive and a negative, because with this really high saber grind that this knife has got, it's a really high flat saber grind and such a small stock thickness with as thin as this thing comes behind the edge. It comes a decent edge out of the box. And so it's going to be a very slicey design. This is going to be, go through material very easy because there's not a whole lot of separation. There's not a whole lot of squeeze that this thing has to do to force itself into material. So I do think it's going to be an excellent performer in that aspect. But again, with that titanium lock bar, any sort of, a lot of people like to baton folding knives as a test. And it's a good test because you're never that's not necessary with the design. A lot of people would argue that that's irrelevant behind testing a knife. And to a point it is, unless you're doing test failure. If you're testing something to failure, you have to break it, right? And so going beyond the relevant test, is relevant. But I think with this knife here, stuff like that, really batoning through wood, any sort of torsional stress, any sort of pressure you put on the spine of this blade is going to be a major negative, because that titanium lock bar in there is going to deformate easier than steel. It's not going to deformate easy. It's not like it's an aluminum lock bar in there. It's made out of plastic. It is still titanium, but it's going to deformate. It's going to wear out a lot quicker and a lot easier than if it was made out of steel. And so I think it's a good choice for this really light use knife. You know, this lightweight but still fully cutting capable. You don't lose a whole lot of cutting ability with this knife. You just lose a little bit of the tactical option, a little bit of the hard use factor. But you're getting, you know, a 3.25 inch blade for less than 2 ounces, which is really cool. And I really do appreciate the ergonomics of this knife as far as that light use task, because I was carving some wood with this thing today, and it's stable in my hand. It doesn't want to go anywhere. I do feel like I've got a decent solid grip on it, but it hurts. This thing is uncomfortable to do hard work with. It's just so thin and it's so square. It digs into, you know, the crease of my hand right here, and it's just not very comfortable to do really hard work with. I can't tell that squeezing it. Sitting here squeezing it feels really good, but once I dig into something, that jimping just chews into my hand. It doesn't work too well in that aspect. So the slicing ability, food prep, things like that on the trail, you know, cutting your shoelaces, cutting, you know, whatever you need to, opening packages, I think this is going to be an excellent performer. And I have a suspicion that that thumb stud is actually aluminum. I don't know, but as concerned with this design, you know, as concerned as weight saving as they were with the design of this knife, I do think that that thumb stud is aluminum, because it looks like hard anodized aluminum. And if they made the lock bar out of titanium, that's probably one of the reasons that they did that to the thumb stud. But I want to talk about, well, just, it's an interesting thought on the pricing, right? Because you know that titanium, again, the lock bar in this raised the price. And this is about $115 online, right? And you know that raised the price up. So could they have come up with this knife for $95 with a steel lock bar and just that slight more bit of weight? Would that have been a better idea than a $115 knife? You know, or an $85 knife opposed to a $115 knife because of that DLC coated titanium lock bar? Was that a good choice for the overall weight savings? I think you really are going to have to be performance oriented. You're really going to have to be into that saving the weight to make this actual knife worth it on that aspect. So it's an interesting choice. It definitely is, but I do like the knife. I really do like the overall design of the knife. You can see that flow through design there. Big old awkward shaped lanyard hole, which kind of adds to the, you know, the overall aesthetic of the knife. Just the way that it looks, it's got that big hole in the back. But I like that they did that, because you know that was just another attempt to save weight, but they didn't sacrifice the handle. They didn't cut it off. They didn't make it thinner in the back. They just took a big chunk out for the lanyard hole, which is, you know, that's good engineering. I do appreciate that. All the black hardware, it just looks excellent, right? This is just a freaking pretty knife. And I just really want to know what the next ones in the family are going to look like. This pocket clip right here, I think the original design for the shortened pocket clip was actually weight savings, because there's no steel in the back of this knife. Besides the screws, those are hard anodized aluminum barrel spacers back there. So there's no steel in the back of this knife. Having a big heavy pocket clip on the back of it is probably just altering the design of the knife. This thing is blade heavy as shit. I mean, the balance point's like, it's all, you know, it's up at the pivot. So that's not a big concern of the knife. I don't think the feeling and maneuverability in hand was a whole big aspect of this design. So cutting down a lot of the weight in the back is just another way to sacrifice that weight. And they were talking, they mentioned on the Benchmade, on that video, Blade HQ video, about how this is going to have better retention than the normal deep carry pocket clip. And that's true for it being square, because if you have the exact same bend in this, in this angle here, for this opposed to something with the standard size deep carry pocket clip, this is going to have more tension because it's a spring, right? And the shorter spring with the same bend is going to have more tension or more spring pressure than the longer spring with the same bend. And so that is going to deliver more pocket retention. You are going to have better retention if it's the same angle. But you can just re-angle or overstress or over-torsion your deep carry pocket clip and have it have a crap load more pocket retention than this design here sitting like this. And so you can't really say that gives you better pocket retention to a point, because there is less flex in it. I mean, at the same point, there's going to be less flex, and so it's a positive and a negative. You know, I can see people really liking this miniaturized deep carry clip, and at the same time, I can see people just really hating it and preferring the original. So it's kind of across the board. It does some interesting things. I don't notice it. I honestly don't notice a difference between the two. The deep carry pocket clip on the normal Benchmade, the normal, full-size deep carry pocket clip, I can find the knife with one here. Screw it. You know what I mean? I don't have one on the table, sorry. But hold on. Yeah, there's a standard deep carry pocket clip. I had to go find one. You see, it's the same shape. So just if you overtension this one, you're going to have more pressure actually with this design here. But I can see it working either way. This works so well. I don't actually notice a difference between the way that it performs sliding in and out of my pocket. They both work excellently well. So, yeah. This is definitely an interesting little knife. And the other note, the box has a date on it. You see that? 7/13/17. It's the first production run box. This is another first production run. This is a freak. Again, from 2017. It doesn't have a date on it. The same thing with this propper. That's first production run from 2017, and it doesn't have a date on it. So I really kind of like they start doing that. I'm going to be a fan if they start putting dates on their boxes. That's going to be a cool thing. That's it. Y'all have a good one.